Section 2, the Common Defense. Chapter 4, Department of Defense. Author, Christopher Miller. Former Green Beret, Miller has served in several Trump administration senior positions, including acting U.S. Secretary of Defense and Director of National Counterterrorism Center, among others. In his overview of the deep problems plaguing today's military and Department of Defense, Miller cites a two-tiered culture of command that shields top officers from accountability while harming lower-level officers and field soldiers, along with wasteful spending, sifting security policies, poor program execution. He also blames the Biden administration for a profoundly unserious equity agenda and vaccine mandates that has hurt the military. He calls for a refocus on warfighting, reestablishing a culture of command accountability and the non-politicization of the DOD, plus increased support to the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, for border protection operations, a national security issue. The U.S. must act to limit China and its nuclear military capability by supporting a denial defense of Taiwan to counter Beijing's domination of Taiwan and Asia. Russia, Iran, and North Korea and transnational terrorism in the Middle East are the top threats to American interests. Miller's proposal calls for calling upon U.S. allies and helping to boost their capacity to defend themselves. Proposals against Russia, USNATO, allies should shoulder the burden of conventional warfare, limiting the U.S. to a nuclear deterrent role. Taiwan and Asian regional allies with Australia should create a collective defense model. In the Middle East, the U.S. should continue supporting Israel while pushing Gulf allies to patrol their own airspace and control their own missile defenses. Importantly, the U.S. must heavily invest to modernize its nuclear military capacity, since China and Russia are doing that. The U.S. must avoid any threat of nuclear coercion, he argues. Among reforms, Miller emphasizes a need to invest in new technologies needed to fight and win wars and support purchase of American-made products and those of allies. He proposes designing a system to purchase new or experimental systems without breaking the law, but avoiding regulatory red tape. He also pushes for restoring America's status as the leading seller of the arsenal of democracy. Boosting foreign military sales is a major conservative goal. To help achieve this goal, he calls for eliminating congressional tiered review of prospective arms deals apart from times when unanimous congressional support is guaranteed. Miller seeks to transform military training and culture, arguing the Army can no longer serve as the nation's social testing ground. Proposals include increased recruitment to the military with, among steps, placing Row 2C in secondary school, expel individuals with gender dysphoria, transgender individuals, cut any public monies for transgender surgeries or to facilitate abortion for service members, eliminate Marxist indoctrination and divisive critical race theory programs, as well as newly established diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and staff. Monitor military schools to remove Marxist indoctrination. Eliminating tenure for academics deemed too liberal left other major proposals. Force Design 2030, labeled the most radical transformation of the Marine Corps since World War II. Adopt irregular warfare as a cornerstone of U.S. military strategy and use this domestically as well as abroad. In a major departure, changing historic U.S. missile defense policy from only deterrence to new adoption and investment in offensive missile defense. In space defense, reverse the Biden administration's current policy, which is deemed limited to deterrence, to provide offensive capabilities. Invest in the U.S. Cybercom system as a critical priority to end Cybercom's participation in federal efforts to fortify elections, to eliminate the perception that DOD is engaging in partisan politics. STC 2025 commentary. Miller presents an established conservative U.S. isolationist approach to war, but calls for a radical and alarming changes to DO policy. He advocates adopting irregular warfare as a cornerstone of U.S. military strategy. In a dangerous shift, he also proposes reversing the historic U.S. position of deterrence in missile and space defense systems. He also suggests sidestepping congressional oversight to purchase new or experimental weapon systems, testing the legal limits of DoD to do so. All are aggressive steps. The call to expel transgender service members and eliminate funding for gender surgery or abortion is in line with Project 2025's larger culture war and anti-gender, as is the elimination of DI policies and curricula, and threat to fire leftist scholars. Chapter 4, Key Points. Refocus the DoD on war-fighting chain of command accountability. Adopt irregular warfare as a cornerstone of US military strategy abroad. Design a system to purchase new or experimental weapon systems without breaking the law but avoiding DoD regulatory red tape. Boost U.S. military sales. Increase DoD support to DHHE, support to DHH, so domestic border security. Limit China and its nuclear military capability by supporting a Taiwan denial defense. In a major step, reverse the historic U.S. policy of deterrence, only to invest and adopt an offensive missile defense policy and a space defense policy and a space defense policy. Support allies to engage in and shoulder the burden of conventional warfare. Enact a radical transformation of the Marine Corps. Force Design 2030. Expel individuals with gender dysphoria, transgender, cut public funding for transgender surgery, or to facilitate abortion for service members. Counter DoD diversity initiatives. Eliminate Marxist indoctrination and divisive critical race theory programs and diversity, equity, and inclusion. D and inclusion. DEI, offices and staff. Monitor military schools to remove Marxist indoctrination. Eliminate tenure for leftist scholars. Invest in U.S. cybercom.